Hi, and welcome back to IntelliJ IDEA Conf 2025. I'm Marit van Dijk, and I'm joined today by my teammates Anton Arhipov, and we will talk about coding with AI, essentially.
Hi there.
Hi.
Good morning. Yes, we're gonna talk about the different ways of using AI tools in your IDE, which is, well, coincidentally, IntelliJ IDEA.
What a coincidence!
Yeah. So I actually want to start with one little slide, since the session is called live coding, and well, I only have two windows with my two different IDs right there of IntelliJ IDEA, but I do have this little diagram to start the session, and it tells you about the different levels of AI-assisted programming in the IDEs and the editors, whatever you use. And this goes from the minimum assistance to the maximum where it tries to assist you as much as possible. And it starts with this little, let me zoom in a little bit right here. Not maybe this way, but this way. So there's minimal AI-assisted completions. So when you type something in the IDE, the AI-assisted completions, or those snippets that are generated for you, are mostly a few words or just a single line. In very exceptional cases, they might be 2 or 3 lines, but this is really rare. And this tool is mostly useful for people who just know what they're doing. They don't want the tools to get in the way, and they just want to move a little bit faster, right? So that's a very intimate UX problem to solve. The other stage that we have there is when the whole snippets of code are suggested for you as you type, and in some cases you even can affect or adjust your completions with, say, adding a comment. Let's say I want to split a list of lists or a list of elements to a list of lists by some criteria, and I can just type it in plain English in a comment, and then the completion will take this comment into account and most likely provide a full snippet of code that you can complete line by line, token by token, or just fully at once. And this is slightly more assistance, right, compared to the previous step. Then we have in editor code generation, where you know what you want to get, kind of similar to the previous step, but you would generate not only the lines of code in the place of the cursor, but also, let's say, some imports. Maybe you're actually asking for something more like implement some interface or implement some integration of a component, and there will be not just a single snippet of code generated for you, but a whole patch for the file. And it actually can go beyond the boundaries of a file, generate tests, for instance. So you call an AI action, and it goes somewhere else to generate those tests. Usually they are separate. And from there, we can already see that we are moving towards the chat, where we can chat with the whole code base in our IDE and ask it to implement some more high-level tasks, like set up database for me in this project. Maybe your project doesn't have database support yet, and you want to implement the persistence layer. Then the chat can generate different snippets of code for you, like that go in different packages, maybe, if you talk about Java. And then, we obviously talk about Java today. And then you can apply those snippets to the project and verify them, then run tests, maybe, whatever you have in the project, to validate the outcomes of chatting with the LLM through the chat window. And from there, we are moving to the interesting area of agent-assisted programming. And have you heard a term vibe coding?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, what do you think of it? Is it useful? Or?
I'm not sure yet.
Yeah,
So I understand that people want to build stuff without maybe
Touching
properly
the code.
understanding how to even write code.
Yeah.
So it makes it very easy also for people who aren't programmers to build something, which, I understand that building something feels really, really cool. But it also means they don't care about the code quality and might end up with very insecure code. I saw some stories of people who were just basically committing their keys and everything getting hacked. So
this is basically
curious.
like Sudo make me a sandwich, right?
Yes.
I don't care how you build it, just build it for me.
Exactly.
Maybe it will somehow work, and the probability that it will work the way you actually want it in a proper way is pretty low.
Well, you might also not know about the proper way.
Yeah.
You just want it to work. You want to do the thing you want, have the
Exactly.
sandwich.
So if we take a little bit a step back, then actually agent-assisted program can be useful. But in this case, we need to know about the code base ourselves. We need to direct the tool to do something for us. Like we still operate with the terms of the code, like controllers. If we, let's say, we are using Spring, for instance, right? We're gonna
For
use,
example.
for example, and then or interfaces or some names of the standard library classes. In this case, we do think about the code. In this case, we can tell the tool to do exactly or more precisely what to do. It can be the same tool, by the way, but it's just a different way of working with it. And in this case, it's not white coding. It's really directing the tool to do something. And well, let's call it directive coding. Maybe
Naming things is hard, but
naming,
yeah.
but it seems to fit nicely within.
Yes.
So we're gonna look at those two agent assistant ways of programming by looking at an example that well, everybody knows and love. You know which one?
Is it Spring Pet Clinic?
It is. Because
Our favorite demo project.
I was watching the talk by Josh yesterday, and he didn't use that, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not so modern. So maybe we can use Spring Pet Clinic as an example to modernize it.
Yep.
So we all love this project, and I know some people who know by heart which line is corresponding to which method and what problems there are and so on. And
I'm not quite there. I just appreciate the fact that when you run it, it has a dog and a kitten and a cat. So
you cannot go wrong with that.
You can pay your puppy and kitten tax.
Exactly. So what I did for this demo and for us to experiment here, I cloned this project into different folders. So I have two versions of it open in my IDE. I wish we could change the theme
Per instance?
per window, but it's not possible.
If only we knew who to ask.
Yeah. Well, the proper way would be probably to open the different versions of the IDE, and then, well, I didn't do that, but I have this little hint on the top, directive in the project name, and the other one is vibe.
Okay.
So we get a distinguish by that name.
You could give them different colors maybe in the toolbar.
Indeed. I can change the color right here.
But what color signifies vibe and what color signifies directive?
Sky. Sky is the vibe, and let's make directive amber. Okay.
Perfect.
We're gonna use Junie.
Of course.
For whatever reason, but well, there are a lot of different agents, and whatever I'm talking about today is actually applicable to any other tool that you prefer to use. Junie is a very raw agent. It doesn't have a lot of integrations. In fact, when people ask me about the features, I say, well, we don't have any. Kinda, we don't.
We have a few.
We have a few cosmetic features that.
Well, I was happy enough to recently point out to someone who was writing an article on how to use Junie. They were like, I'm very upset that I have to continue to approve the terminal commands. And I was like, but we have an allow list now. So,
And we have a brave mode.
Yeah, and we have brave mode. But like I keep saying, I'm not brave, so I never check that box. I don't want to give Junie blanket access to my terminal.
I only use brave mode.
Well, different people, different styles.
Indeed. So what are we going to do? Let's start with the vibe coding scenario in this case. What is the worst possible prompt that you can come up with to ask the agent to improve the application?
The worst to improve.
Yeah. Make it better.
Yes. Oh, that is very vague. Yes, sure.
We could do that, but well, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens, and we can always roll back if it goes wrong. Yeah?
Yes.
What could go wrong?
Hang on. From the chat, someone is suggesting improve it.
Improve it.
Let's go with that.
Improve.
Thank you.
Improve it. So when we talk between us, we say improve it, or sometimes we say something that this or that or something. Those verb, or how do you call it?
Sorry, I don't know the proper grammatical structures, but it points to something else.
The human understands sometimes by the context, or we have some order. But even us, we sometimes are confused and asking, like, what do we mean by this, or what do we mean by it? I think LLMs don't have that yet, and the tools don't provide this kind of interaction yet. Like, hopefully it comes.
Yes, what does it or this refer to?
So this scenario will take a while, I think. I'm brave enough to run it in a code mode, and I will just execute it, and we'll see what happens. It will generate some plan.
Yep. Also, the people in the chat are complaining that you should go to dark mode.
Not gonna happen.
You're team light mode?
Yes, I'm team light mode with a light header.
Yes. When I do go to light mode, I do also use the light header, because otherwise I get confused.
To be fair, folks, if you asked me in the evening, I would agree. This is morning right now.
Yes.
Not going to happen. So let's.
It's morning for us. Maybe it's evening for some of the people in the chat.
I see. Well, primary is like, I'm the primary user.
For the user, it's morning. Yes.
Exactly. So as we can see, Junie makes a plan and tries execute on that. We're not gonna disturb it for some while. Let it do the work. And meanwhile, we're gonna switch to the other window where we have this directive coding scenario, and where we know about the code base, and we might know or we might not know. Let's assume that we don't know.
Oh, we don't know the Spring Pet Clinic?
Well,
let's assume.
Let's assume. We do know that there are only controllers and there is no service layer. It uses JPA.
Yep.
There's owner, pets, vets, and one other entity, so there are 4 entities, and some other code that is front-end related.
I could cheat and open Pet Clinic and have a look. But in the meantime, there is a question from the chat, if you're okay taking questions in the middle.
Meanwhile,
someone is asking, are plans in Junie built by the LLM, or is it a secret source of Junie?
It's built by LLM, but of course not just the LLM looks at the initial prompt and then builds it. Of course, there is a system prompt or some workflow that first generates the plan, and then we execute based on that plan. I don't know exactly how precisely it will follow the plan. Sometimes interesting things happen. Sometimes
also it changes the plan as it's working, but for the types of stuff that I've used it for, the plan is generally it's going to go look for the files and find the information it needs.
Indeed.
See what it needs to change, and then go change it and run tests and build it.
And the plan is dynamic. It can generate new tasks as it discovers more code base in your project. So let's go to Junie, and well, as I said, suppose we assume we don't know anything about the project, but we want to improve it, and we have those example prompts right here, like on the right hand side. So generate project specific guidelines. We can actually add the guidelines file. Currently we are running without guidelines. Like, this is just pure pure project. We are very naive, like we are following very naive workflow here, not adjusting anything yet. There is another prompt: create a list of tasks to improve the project. Or we can analyze the requirements and create the improvement plan. So if we know what kind of improvements and we have those requirements somehow listed in the file, provided maybe by a project manager or I don't know, who else?
Or a discussion with an LLM on what could we improve for this project.
Exactly. Or implement the improvements according to the task list that we just generated. So let's pick, let's say, an improvement plan instead of the task list. As it says here in the beginning that read the file from docs requirements.md, we can adjust the prompt. Like, why not? We can tell it to analyze the project code base and create the detailed improvement plan for the project. And before that, I can just say, because, well, I want to be more expressive and say, I want to improve this project's code quality according to the commonly accepted best practices for Spring Boot projects.
I was going to say, because there are no developers who argue about what the best practices are actually the best practices, right?
There like to use Lombok or not to use Lombok.
Oh no! Don't go there.
And but Spring has been around for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Why is it so good? Why did it become so popular? Is because it provided those recipes. The framework provided those recipes, best practices that most of the people follow. Well, there are always people who argue that they are not great. Those practices, you should do something else. And, well, they are probably right. I will not argue. But here we give the abstract requirement to the LLM. And, again, it will save the plan to the plan.md project. I'm going to switch to the coding mode instead so that it can create this file. Meanwhile, we can switch back to
I think if you do ask, it will also create a file, or at least it has for me. But, it's AI, so it's non-deterministic. It might not every time.
Exactly. So at first, we didn't have this ask mode.
Yes.
And whenever you asked something from Junie, it was so eager to go and modify everything. So I learned that even if you tell it not to do something, it would sometimes still try to modify. So instead of saying like the negation, like instead of telling do not tell it what to do. So you kind of can redirect its work somewhere else, and that somewhere else was redirecting it to a file. And I kind of learned that, and now it's my usage pattern. So I don't really care if it's an ask mode or a code mode. Sometimes I use ask mode, and yes, it does create a file. So we can see it's executing. Let it do the work, and let's check quickly what is happening in that.
On the vibe code side.
Yeah, vibe code. So it actually tries to modify something, right? It discovered the code base.
In ask mode or code mode in the vibe code?
Code mode.
Code mode.
Yeah. Feeling adventurous. So
Brave.
pagination unit was created. Error util was created. It modified the application properties file. The owner controller got quite a few modifications. As you can see, it's adding SLF4J.
Okay, logging might be an improvement. It wasn't there before.
Yeah, that's a good sign that maybe it's actually doing some...
I mean, we can argue whether or not you should have util classes, but,
Oh, yeah. What else? It actually modifies the controller quite in a few places, as you can see. Yeah, because it's adding logging.
Okay.
Of course.
This is where code completion can also be super useful, by the way. If you're adding logging, even if you're adding it manually, it will suggest log messages for you that are usually fairly good, so it saves you on typing there.
But as you can understand, well, whatever it's doing here, we didn't specify anything, how to improve. So we kind of trust, or we experiment. We don't know what
But
it will
hopefully
do.
verify.
Hopefully we can verify, and hopefully it doesn't break our project.
Did it run any tests on the vibe coding side? Because that's one of my favorite things about Junie, is that it will add tests if there aren't any and run them and make sure that everything passes.
Indeed. Well, we could have told it to run the test, but we were trying to do the worst possible scenario right here.
Like the least amount of information.
Exactly. So it is running there, and well, modifying. I think it's just adding the logging files right now. Where is it spinning? Implement the most valuable improvements. Create utility, class for pagination, error handling, and then update the controllers. So Junie decided that adding logging is the most important part, and probably it is.
That is either a compliment to the code base, that's the most important improvement, or Junie might not understand properly what the best.
Yeah, it's probabilistic.
Without direction,
it's a probabilistic system. Maybe next time we run the same prompt, it will do completely different stuff, right?
Yes.
And if we go back to our directive coding scenario, now we have a plan. This is how it looks like. It's an MD file. Let's render it a little better. And it suggests architecture, design, service layer, implementation. So we discovered that there are only controllers. There are no service components. The controllers are using repositories directly. It provides the rationally, the explanation why this change is valuable. Lombok integration. I wouldn't say that I like this one. I want to keep it clean, rational.
Not to have a discussion on whether we should or shouldn't use Lombok, but let's not use Lombok.
But here I have a choice. I have a choice what to implement and what to discard from the picture completely. Modern Java features, what else? API web layer, REST API implementation makes sense. It uses Spring MVC right now, no REST APIs. So maybe part of the modernization would be moving to a front-end, pure front-end implementation without templates and without server-side rendering. For some, it will be an improvement. For some, it will be a step back. I don't know. That's up for us to decide. Exception handling, so how to organize data access. I'm curious about testing here, actually. So it tells me we could improve the code coverage and test quality improvement. When I was experimenting with that previously, I saw a very nice thing. I was hoping that it will be suggested right now to use test containers. So instead of using H2, use test containers. But this time it didn't really provide that. But since I know what I want, I can actually add this requirement because it's a file, right?
Yes.
And use this file to feed into the agent on the next stage to actually come up with a list of tasks to implement for the changes I want to do.
And would you then edit the file yourself to say use test containers, or do you continue the prompting and say update the file to use test containers?
I would edit the file because
maybe depends on how big the list of changes that you want.
Yeah. I think it depends maybe on the level of my requirements. Like, are they too high level, too abstract? Then maybe I would tell it via the agent to regenerate this file, basically. But if it's just a single requirement that I want to add, then I would do it manually. DevOps and monitoring, documentation, implementation strategy. Oh, that's a nice thing. It tells us the priority, what should be done first and later. We will not be able to implement everything here, but we can pick something up. So maybe architecture design could be one of the things, or testing. I feel fancy about architecture design this time. So even if I have everything in this file, like the whole text. The next thing I could tell it to do is to, let's say I just copy this architecture design words, and I go to Junie window again, and I go back to the examples, and I pick up this prompt about the tasks, analyze the code base, and identify areas of improvement. I don't need that. It has been analyzed already. Create a list of actionable improvement tasks and save it to the enumerated checklist. So we can just add a few clarifications here. Create a detailed list of actionable improvements for architecture and design in docs plan.md file, and save it of tasks for actionable improvement. Okay, broken English. It will understand.
Sometimes it will understand.
Yeah,
and,
let it go.
It will get past typos, unless your typos are in specific file names, then it will create the files for you. In the meantime, there are a few questions actually from the chat, but someone specifically asked, how does it know to improve test coverage? Did it run tests? I don't think it did just now. It didn't,
but it seems that there's a workflow or a general tendency in the LLMs. If they assess what you have in the project, they basically come up with on a high level, it's basically the same list of areas to look at. And they would suggest always to do like architecture, test improvements, code coverage, and so on.
Yep.
So, but you can tell it to improve code coverage. We are kinda directing the agent, but it's almost still the vibe coding, because we don't tell it how to improve it.
Yep.
We don't tell it the workflow, how you want it to be implemented, in which area, in which package. Spring Pet Clinic is a very small application.
Yep.
Imagine this huge project where you have thousands of tests. Would you feed all the tests immediately? Probably not. LLMs,
probably for the area that I'm working on, or...
So the LLMs are working better if you specify those tasks in chunks.
Yes,
right?
So that's why it's also useful to have the list. Then you can pick the ones that you want to work on and maybe say, okay, pick up the first one, or...
Exactly. This time it was pretty fast, because it immediately discovered that we are only doing the architecture and design. It doesn't have to generate the tasks for anything else. And as you can see, we have enumerated task list with those checkboxes. And now, usually what I would do, of course, I would scan the list and find whatever I want to change or do differently, or maybe not to do. Maybe I don't agree with some minor things in the plan or in the task list. Let's open it up again just for a second. Yeah. But now I can actually tell it to run the improvements plan according to the task list. So implement the improvements plan according to the task list in docs tasks.md file, and mark the completed items with a checkbox. And I will be even so specific that I will tell it how to mark. As you can see, like being more specific in specifying the task will actually raise the probability of the tool doing what you want it to do. So
it's almost like people. If you tell them more specifically what to do, they will more specifically, hopefully, do what you ask them to do.
Exactly.
So there are a few questions from the chat, and one is also, does Junie learn from its mistakes?
It's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. I think no.
Yeah,
Currently, no.
I'm also going to go with no, but we can course correct by giving it additional prompts or editing our prompt or editing the plan like we just discussed.
It depends what you mean by its mistakes. Again.
Yes.
So if LLM generates some red code, Junie will, or the agent will run a tool, a verifier on that code, and will detect that it doesn't compile or the test doesn't pass. And this is a mistake. But is it the agent's mistake? Probably not. It's just how the code is generated. So if we have this feedback from the tool or from the verifier that, well, it didn't go as planned, then we can take it back and try again. So in this vibe coding scenario right now, we can see that, well, there are a few changes that got modified, like in the project, right? We have some files that got modified, and let's quickly check one of them. So mostly it's about logging. And, well, it depends on your expectations, right? You tell it to improve something, maybe you meant something else completely, but machine doesn't know.
Yep.
So maybe it's not a good idea to go with this kind of prompts and not being too specific. So don't be afraid of being too specific and exactly naming things that you want to improve. One thing that we have in IntelliJ when it comes to the integration with this kind of tools, there are agents that you can run from the command line, but they don't integrate with the IDE. But when you are integrated into the IDE, then you can use some of the functions that the IDE provides. And one of the greatest things that we have is a local history. And if you go there, show history for the project.
Not a lot of history in the project.
Not a lot of history, yeah. Okay, it was pretty new.
Because you haven't made a lot of changes yet.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to show something else. It's not there. Anyways. Then what is our step here? Like we probably, as a user, I would probably just roll back. So just saying to improve something is probably not a good idea. I would rather, for vibe coding, specify if I want to stay away or disconnected from the code, not to think about the classes, packages, tests, and so on, I would rather think in functional scenarios. What is a functional scenario in case of pet clinic, for instance? I would ask Junie to help me. So roll back all the changes. Suggest a list of functional enhancements in this project. And I can go into ask mode.
And someone is asking, what is start new task in vibe coding? Is task a concept from the domain, like splitting work into tasks and running them one by one, or is this something related to the Junie UI?
It's rather related to Junie. So when you run the first prompt, there you can enter a follow-up prompt as well. And it will keep the history, keep the context of the previous executions.
Yes.
But it will consume more of the context window. So we are limited here by the context window, and eventually, if we are running out of that, then the agent will start compacting that by losing some of the details of our.
It uses a rolling, or what's it called, rolling window, or
there are different strategies that the agents use. As far as I know, Junie doesn't do the running window. It tries to create a summary.
Right.
So like shorter text of everything that happened in the text. So in the chat. So currently I run the ask mode. It actually generated the file as we mentioned previously. And I can run the follow-up prompt maybe in a different mode, and it will, take into account whatever we created previously in the same task. So answering the question from the chat, we can start the new task and forget what we already had. So it will be kind of a new session.
A new chat, a new context, a new session.
Start clean. So what did the agent suggest to us is to, on a functional level, implement user authorization, pet health records. So it talks about functionality. So if we wanted to go the vibe coding way, we better talk not in the vague technical terms, but in expressing what do we want to get.
Yes. What functionality do we want?
This way, it kind of makes sense if the agent is capable of implementing the functional tasks so that you don't really specify anything about the code, how it should look like, the architecture, and so on. Then probably that's the way to go. But I would say it's still some sort of a probability that we get something working out of that. So I would rather take this requirement or the new functional requirement and generate a detailed technical task list for the agent to follow. So I would start with vibe coding, but I would fall back to directive coding, knowing exactly how to implement this functionality still. Yep. So we can switch back to, is that the vibe coding? Yeah. Where is the directive one? Yeah. Somehow it switched places.
Interesting.
Yeah, it happens. So what are we doing here? It's still working, right? It executes on the task list. As you can see, the plan is now much longer and much more detailed. And as it executes, it's interesting. We can see some +1, -1, +1, -1. It's probably because it, generated some code that was red, so it retries again.
Right.
And therefore, the process takes longer, obviously, but it wants to get a correct solution to you, because then if it just generates the code that is red, that is not so correct, or just hallucinated for some reason, then you will just spend much more time fixing it. Mm-hmm. So we want to get this wall clock for implementing the task shorter, not just a single shot execution shorter. Let's see. It still exercises the pet controller. Okay, so at least it implemented the vet service. So we can see some progress right there.
Cool.
Nice. Okay, let it be there. Is there... Oh, there is a bunch of different new classes that appeared. Owner service, pet service. So it generated the new layer. Yep. And now it tries to integrate that into our project so that it actually needs to extract the old logic into those new classes and substitute with whatever it generated.
And I'm still curious whether it ran any tests while doing that to make sure that nothing is broken.
We would see that.
Of course, probably the tests would have to be rewritten if you're extracting the logic from wherever it was to the service layer.
But currently, the task was complete, right? But, we are still curious if...
or does the application still start even?
Yeah.
Can we still use it? That would be a good quick test for a small system.
Indeed. Let's try that. So
also, in the meantime, there are lots of questions from the chat, but thanks, Siva, also for helping out answering those. Someone asked, can Junie improve security? For example, replace basic out with OAuth.
I tried that. I think it's a pretty hard task for the agents to figure out right now. I tried configuring security, so I spent quite a big chunk of time trying to get it working, but and it was successful, but I didn't try exactly this scenario, so it's something to try for me. I wouldn't bet that it can succeed from the first try,
Yeah.
But maybe
you might need to give it some more hints on how to do that.
As you can see, we have some red code still, and I told you that we are trying to get a solution out that is not red. Why this can happen is that it comes from the question people sometimes ask: what is the difference between the chat and the agent? And the chat is a one-shot execution of your prompt and getting the results. Sometimes the chat is equipped with some tools to integrate the code back into the chat, but it might be hallucinated. It might be,
and in this case, the
incomplete.
chat would be, for example, AI assistant chat?
Yes.
Can you open that to show it? Because someone did ask earlier, is Junie the AI assistant?
Right.
So they're slightly different, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, so there is a chat window that has access to your code base. If you enable the code base mode, it would go and collect and analyze whatever you have in the project, and then assemble the context for this request. Or there is also an edit mode that will try to patch whatever you have in the project for the same task. But that's a one-shot execution inside the LLM.
So not like Junie, which is an agent which will go and change it and then can run your tests or build your project and take those results to fix anything that needs fixing.
So when we work with the chat in this scenario, we are the agent.
Yes.
We make the decisions. We make the decisions which tests to run, which code to integrate, whether or not to re-execute the request with some constraints and so on. Inside the agent, like Junie, this happens automatically. And why do we have this red code here is that the agent does not run infinitely. It will do a fixed number of iterations, and if those iterations are exhausted, then it stops. And this is what people often ask, like, why did it stop? It didn't complete the work. Well, because it might take quite some time.
Iterations,
many iterations, and we better stop for you to, direct us.
Yes.
Better. In a vibe coding manner, we can tell it to continue like this.
Yeah, if we don't know the specific instructions on how to get it past this hump where it might have painted itself into a corner. Someone is also saying the same in the chat. Is there a limit in responses? I used Junie. I said to make me changes and tests. It forgot the tests. I said it again, and then it did it. So you might have to remind it, or
again, it's a probability.
Yep.
One way of raising up this probability is coming up with good guidelines. For instance, in the Markdown document. Do
you want to show the Junie guidelines file?
So I don't have it yet, but let's build one.
Yep.
So if we go to this plus button, there is a create project guidelines file or action that will give you some examples right here. So it's not generated by Junie, it's just a template or with examples. You modify it the way you want. And we could tell it follow best practices for Spring and Java projects, and maybe make sure that tests pass.
Yes, please. Thank you. You can also tell it to use test containers if that's what you want.
Let's not derail, because we are currently
in the Vibe project.
No, we are in directive project, but we are changing the architecture, not
the test
quality. So what I want to get here is that the tests would pass. One thing that might happen with all those agents is that tests are failing after the changes, and it fails to correct them or correct the code, and then it just adds an ignore annotation into those tests.
Oh, I have not seen that. I have where it changes the tests and not the code that should be passing the tests.
Exactly. So one way to fix that is actually make those tests read-only on an operating system level. So if you are guiding your agent with the guidelines and telling it not to modify the tests, and it still modifies the tests, the most bulletproof approach would be just forbid modifying the file physically.
Yeah, so I've done some like strict TDD with Junie where I had the guidelines say do not in capital letters not, do not change the tests, only change the implementation.
Well, as I was saying, do not thingy works
Yes,
not so well as telling it what to do.
Yeah. There is also a question. You mentioned cloud. Where does it store the project data? I don't think we store any of the data.
No.
I mean, I know we don't, but can we choose to stay inside the EU? And what do we know about the privacy? Do you know about any of these? It's also asking, I think maybe someone asked which models we are using.
Let's start with models. It's a simpler answer. We use Claude 3.7 right now, as of now, for code generation. And as far as I know, we use GPT-4o for the glue tasks like generating the workflow and planning and stuff. But most of the work is done by Claude 3.7. There would be immediate question, why not Claude 4? Because it's not so simple to just change the model. It will affect how the whole system works.
Yes.
And we need to adjust the prompts for that.
Exactly.
So the team is running evaluations right now.
Yep.
And if you look at the benchmarks that are published by the vendor, then version 4, of course, is more superior than 3.7, but this is not the case. It might not be the case in case of agents, because there are many iterations. There are different specific prompts that tailor the workflow depending on the model. So we might put a better model on the back end, but get not so good results with that.
Yep.
So we need time to actually add that and ensure the quality. What is happening? So what I did, I asked it to continue, but I asked it to make sure that the tests pass. We actually added that to the guidelines as well, but we wanted to be, insistful this time. The other question that was regarding the data.
Where does the data go,
privacy.
and is it possible to stay inside the EU?
I don't want to lie here because I definitely know that we are using the provider directly from Junie. Then it depends. I need to get this answer from the engineering team.
Yes, we'd have to look into that one. But I do know that we don't store the data, and we only work with providers that also don't store it and promise not to train on.
That's a legal requirement by us,
yes.
Right? So one of the things that happened when we were working on the integration with Claude models in AI Assistant is that, it took some time to put all those documents and legal requirements in place, and people were desperate, asking why don't you provide this Claude model? Well, it takes time to do some document work.
Yes.
Okay, so it's up to running the tests. Now I'm very curious to see what will happen. Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, a while ago, someone also asked, do we need plugins for that? So both AI Assistant and Junie are separate plugins.
Exactly. Let's open this up. Plugin.
If you want to show that while it's running the tests.
Exactly. So actually, for AI functionality in IntelliJ, we have 4 different plugins. One of them is full line code completion. This is what we had on the diagram as a minimal code completion.
That's what generates the code for you in your editor, and it runs locally inside your IDE. It doesn't send anything to the cloud, and that's included in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate.
Right. So the other one is AI Assistant, which has the most of the functionality, providing you the cloud completion, AI actions, the chat with different modes, integrations with models, and even more. We have some interesting capabilities there, like generating commit messages, for instance, which is very popular.
Or one I really like is explain code or explain regex.
Yeah.
You know. Or explaining commits, lots of actions throughout your IDE to support your workflow.
Then we have Grazie, which is a spell checker, which is part of the suite, actually.
Yes.
And Junie, of course, Junie is another plugin. So it all is covered, is it? I think so. Like most of it is covered by the same license. Grazie might have another one.
So the full line code completion is included in the IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate license, and AI Assistant and Junie, and possibly Grazie, we don't know, sorry, are included in your AI license. So that does require an additional subscription.
Exactly.
But I think it's also now included in the all product pack, which is what people have been asking for. Someone is saying they love that spell checker. Grazie. Anyway, that was a pun. Anyway.
Any more questions?
Any more questions?
It's modifying the tests, so I hope it will run them. Like, at least my assumption is.
So someone asked, is MCP integration planned? Do you know? I'm not sure.
For Junie?
For Junie.
For Junie, I asked the team, and they said that we will have to implement that sooner.
Right.
How much sooner, they didn't tell me, but it means that they are looking into it.
Right, okay. And then someone also asked, instead of terminal commands, why doesn't Junie use the IDE API to create the directories and files so it doesn't need terminal access?
It actually uses some of the functions from the IDE, mostly for searching and modifying the files, and I hope they will implement the integration with refactorings. But why it's not implemented for creating the directories, well, maybe it's not so efficient. I don't know. Maybe it's more efficient to do that with the terminal command.
I would very much be interested to have it use the refactorings that we have in the IDE instead of using an LLM to do them.
Exactly.
For example. Someone is also asking, is there a point to use AI chat, or is Junie ask mode superior?
I would say yes. Sometimes I find myself actually falling into the AI assistant chat for some things, for one-shot tasks that don't require iteration.
Same. If I have just one small question, how do I XYZ? Instead of going to Google, I ask AI assistant. If I'm working on a bigger task, there's that word again, and I think that I might want to talk to Junie, iterate on it, and then have it make changes, then Junie ask mode.
Exactly. So it decided to modify all the tests first, and then probably it will run test. See, it's happening.
But it didn't ask you for permission. Is that because you checked Brave mode?
Brave mode, yes.
Okay, yeah. So for me, it would ask me to run the test, and I'm like, okay, I'll allow that and add it to the allow list. And
currently, it's a command that is used from the IDE. It's not a terminal command, as you can see. It executed the tool window. If you tell it in the guidelines how to execute tests, maybe you want to execute them from the command line, and you give it the command, then it will actually run the terminal.
Run Maven verify or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it runs the tests by one, but it runs all of them. Let's see if it succeeds. It's at least I would anticipate that. Okay, it managed to run some of them, but it failed with the pet controller tests. What is happening now is that since it's failing, it tells me that further changes are necessary to identify and resolve issues. So this is the place where this iteration is starting to happen. It modified the code, it modified the test, now it ran the tests, even though the code wasn't read anymore, there is another level of verification. With tests, if tests are failing, it will try to modify the implementation. That's a good sign. At least it doesn't try to modify the test, even though I didn't specify that.
Yep.
Like I could have. So you see, in this whole workflow, we are keeping an eye, and we are thinking about how to do something and what not to do, which code we wanted to modify and which not. And we can adjust our requirements and guidelines and stop the agent whenever we see it going into the loop. So we are kind of in a full control. We are the supervisor now.
Yep.
In vibe coding mode, we are not even a supervisor. We are just asking to do something, and we don't think about the code and the outcomes, and the probability of getting something is not so great. So I'm all direct coding team now.
Yes.
And I see how these tools could be useful there.
Yep. Well, for me also, it depends on how well I know what I'm doing. If I'm trying maybe a completely different technology that I'm not so familiar with, I might not be able to be as directive as, if I'm doing back-end stuff with Spring.
Another question or comment that I see people saying very often when they see all this is that, I could have done this by hand much faster because I know.
Sometimes yes.
Sometimes yes. The thing is, the agent doesn't have a bad day. The agent doesn't need to sleep. The agent doesn't have a hangover after yesterday's party, and so on. And even though you can do something faster than the agent, like in a fraction of a time, or like in this very moment, on the long run, the agent, even the slowest agent, will be faster than you.
Yes, it doesn't need, X hours of sleep,
Exactly.
Things like that.
Or maybe you are not just feeling too well today.
Yep. Because of the lack of sleep, for example.
Yeah, sometimes it happens, when you have an early flight for a conference that is in the office.
Sometimes that happens, yes. I wasn't going to mention that, but someone also asked about the credit sizes of Junie. How does that work?
We have Pro and Ultimate. The reality is that if you are an active user of Junie, you better go with Ultimate. Pro is not designed for this kind of code generation. The agents, because they do this iteration work, they are quite token hungry.
Yes.
And they will exhaust your Pro plan. Junie will exhaust your Pro plan very fast.
Yes, which might also be a reason to use AI Assistant, for example, because it's one shot, it doesn't iterate, so it doesn't use your tokens quite so quickly. And
the thing is, if you just go with the scenarios as we did for vibe coding, and you get some strange results, because what we showed was the extreme case, like improve it.
Yeah.
Nothing's there.
Be as vague as possible.
Yeah. But even if you are more specific and you don't get the results that you expected, you might just discard the whole category of tools because you are disappointed. And if it works for once, like maybe you just specified the task a little bit more precisely and used some different word that led to a good result, then your expectations are just way over the top.
Yes.
And on the next run you will fail, and then there is a huge disappointment again.
Yep.
Then
it's almost like coding. Anyway, and I have certain tasks where it works really, really well. Maybe because my prompt was specific enough, and other tasks where it gets hopelessly stuck. There are also some people asking about this. Junie gets stuck in a cycle where it did changes, recognizes it didn't work. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that as well, like it has a fixed number of iterations that it will use. I know that you've also mentioned sometimes it helps to, if it does get stuck, either you can type the continue like you did, but sometimes it's also a hint to maybe break up that work into smaller pieces. So instead of giving it a huge task, see if you can break that up just like you would yourself if you're working on something.
Exactly. So we didn't succeed with fixing all the tests. There are some tests still failing. We don't have time to fix them.
No.
One thing that we can open just quickly in the very last minute is the existing code and how it was changed. Just to see that the new code was integrated, this owner service wasn't there, it was it generated an interface, it extracted the existing functionality into this implementation of the service, and now it integrated it into the controller as well. I think it could have done a little bit more work here, but need to expect that further. So what I would do next, if I had time, if infinite time to play around with it, is to tailor my prompts and adjust my guidelines how to proceed fixing those tests. What exactly to fix, and maybe even do some manual work. You don't have to do everything via the agent. You can do stuff manually. You are the developer, you are in charge.
And sometimes I prefer the deterministic results of doing stuff myself.
Exactly.
I know we didn't get to answer all of the questions from the chat, unfortunately, and we've run out of time, but I know that you've also done a bunch of Junie live streams already.
Exactly.
That people can find on the IntelliJ IDEA channel or join the Junie Discord, where you can also talk to the team and other Junie users. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today. Thank you so much, Anton, for all of your demos.
Thanks for having me. Hope you had fun.